Man, how did we get here? Unbelievable. But episode number 16 of the Rob Ellis Show, A2D Radio. First off, let me just say I appreciate everybody's participation. I see all you guys in the chat section, but everybody who has been watching, streaming, checking it out, either live or whenever you get a chance to look at it, I do appreciate it. We're having a lot of fun here on A2D, and I'm having a lot of fun with the show. And kind of mixing and matching, certain weeks I give you a little sit down with somebody and we walk through their career journey. And what I'm trying to do there is just show anybody, no matter what walk of life, no matter what you're doing, no matter where you are, that's not necessarily the end point, right? You got to do what you got to do to kind of get by at certain points, but there's a journey there. And while you might not always see it, at some point you will get there if you keep plugging away and doing the right things. Or we just bang it out, man, and we talk sports. We talk about what's happening in Philadelphia sports or sports in general, and that is what today's show is going to be. We are going to tackle everything that's going on in the world of Philadelphia sports and even beyond. I'll hit you with this one beyond first. The streak is over. Yes, the Baltimore Ravens' 24-game preseason winning streak came to a halt Monday night against the Washington Commanders. Woohoo. I mean, the absurdity of all of it, that it even meant something to the Ravens and John Harbaugh. And I love John Harbaugh, but the fact that meant anything to him, come on, man. Number one. And number two, Washington basically hits the game win. It was like 9 seconds left, but they hit the game winning field goal and then they celebrate like it's the Super Bowl. I'm thinking to myself, like, what bizarro world am I in, man? It's just crazy. I can't even figure this thing out. But anyway, my first observation last night was we're talking preseason game here. We're talking that kind of excitement. But I want to start with our A2D agree to disagree question of the day, because this has been, batted around and talked about a lot in Philadelphia. And you see it right there. Marcus Mariota should be the number 2 quarterback. Agree or disagree? I'll disagree. What's up, Tom? What's up, everybody? I see all you guys. I see Anders. I see Tom. That's a great picture, by the way, from Tom. Is that a Michigan or Maryland logo there? Is that what that is in the avatar? Just curious. What's up, Jake? All right. So here's the deal. I agree with the poll as Jake does in this sense. I don't see the Eagles pulling the trigger, barring injuries. Yes, it is Maryland. Thank you, Tom. I don't see the Eagles pulling the trigger on something, considering the money that they're paying Mariota, considering the setup that they have. Here's what I mean by that. I think they're hoping that Mariota, number one, will figure it out. And I think they're going to do more to cater to him. And I think if he comes into the game, they're going to, for lack of a better word, dumb this thing down. If you look at the options that are out there, I know people have floated Carson Wentz. There's no chance Carson Wentz happens. That bridge is burned. Goodbye. And does anybody else want to see him holding the ball for 15 minutes in the pocket and then getting it stripped and him getting beat up and then him being hurt too? I don't. Okay. Nick Foles, I love him. Who can't love him? The guy's got a statue, as he should. He's done. He's cooked. Okay. I'm not looking for Nick Foles to make a return here as I adjust my camera a little bit. There you go. I'm not looking for that to happen either. Okay. Tom says, I agree, but disagree. Yes, this one is hard. Yes, there is no chance Carson Wentz. The one guy I would consider is Matt Ryan. And I know a lot of people are going to say, you're saying all these other guys are cooked. Matt Ryan's cooked. I think things were such a mess last year. I really do. Was such a mess last year with the Colts that I think if he was willing to accept his role as a number 2, I think he'd be okay here. I do. Like, let me ask you this. A serious question here. If Hurts goes down for an extended period of time, who do you feel better about plugging in there? If your choices are Wentz, Foles, anybody else who's out there sort of floating around, I feel better about Matt Ryan personally. I do. I would feel better about him. Mariota on the first team in a game, plus he has experience. All right, Walter, I hear you with that. And that's where I'm at. Like, here's the thing. Tanner McKee, and I give him total props for the way that he's come in here and done a hell of a job considering where he was drafted. He looks poised. It doesn't look like it's too big for him the moment. It looks like things are kind of slowed down for him. He can drive a ball off of that back foot, and he can hit you with a slant. He can hit you deep. I like what I've seen. But man, it's been 2 preseason games. Like, you're really ready to turn over a team that's ready to win now, loaded with talent, Super Bowl ambitions, to Tanner McKee? I'm not. I'm sorry. I want the kid on the team. I want him to be the number 3. But that's the extent of that. And I know people will bring up the Brock Purdy thing. I'm telling you, what happened in San Francisco is the exception to the rule. It just is. It's the exception to the rule. So I'm going to agree with the poll that he should be the backup quarterback, with the caveat that things do have to get better. And the problem you have here is, and again, you want to chime in, let me know where you're at. Let me know. All right. And Nick, thanks. I think that's a compliment. The only talk show host that I can stomach. Thank you, I think. But yeah, I mean, I think if you look at it from the perspective of, if it's short term, like it was last year with Minshew, and even the year before, if this is 2 games, 3 games, that's how I'm looking at it. Let's face it, folks. If this is something, God forbid, that's long term, and Hurts is done for the season, week 8 or something like that, odds are you're likely screwed. Now, we've seen exceptions, obviously. Nick Foles, the ultimate, right? But the backup quarterback thing is important. Like, I think a lot of people look at this subject and they say, this is classic media making more out of something than it is. Look at all the good stuff the Eagles have. And no doubt, I mean, there are a ton of things to point at and say, my God, I can't wait for this season to start. But if you don't think the number 2 quarterback is important, man, we couldn't disagree more. We could not disagree more. Just go back to 2017 with Nick Foles. Go back before that when Michael Vick came in there as the backup quarterback. Like, we've seen this before. You go back to Andy Reid days when it was Coy Detmer or it was A.J. Feely. We've seen backup quarterbacks step in and help bridge things for teams. We've seen it in this city, probably more than any city has seen it. So to think in that violent sport with a dual threat quarterback who runs the ball and throws, who has the ball in his hands so much, who is subject to violent hits, if you don't think the backup quarterback's important, man, then I think you have no idea what you've been watching. So I think it is very, very important for starters. So I will agree with the poll that he should be, and our question of the day, that he should be the backup quarterback. But, I think it may be a short leash. If it's a situation where Mariota comes in there and he's playing poorly, let's say you're going to need him for 6 games. Okay. And we're 2 or 3 in, and this thing looks ugly. That's when I think you may break glass in case of emergency and maybe see if Matt Ryan wants to come out of the booth. That's what I would do. I don't love a lot of the other options. I really don't. So I would think long and hard about this thing, but I think it is a critical thing to watch. And I'll tell you what, on Thursday night, I'm playing the guy for a half. Mariota gets the first half, and I'm hoping that the Colts' number 1 defense is out there so I can get a better gauge of what that looks like. I go third quarter, McKee. If you want to give Book the 4th, fine. Give him the 4th, whatever. We know where that's headed. Book's going to the practice squad. McKee's going to be the 3. Mariota's going to be the 2. That's the way this thing's looking. So beyond that, a couple other things to dive into here. The other, well, let me just hit one more thing too that I want to mention in discussing the backup quarterback. When you consider how much harder the schedule is this year, I don't think you're going to be in games where you're blowing the other team out, where the 4th quarter really doesn't matter and you're just kind of milking clock and running the ball. I think you're going to be in tight games where it's either sort of back and forth, or maybe you're trailing and you got to come back. This is where it's important. Like, nobody doubts Mariota can run around and still make plays with his legs. We know that. We know the athleticism is there, and that's where the comp is with Jalen Hurts, in that they both have the skill set that they can run. But the problem you have is, if you're losing, doing sort of the, backyard sort of ad-libbing, street ball kind of stuff, you got to be able to throw. You got to be able to hit timing passes. You got to be able to hit guys that are wide open. I mean, go back to the preseason game last week, the Cleveland game. There are guys wide open that he's overshooting. The other problem you're going to have is if A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and even Dallas Goedert to a lesser extent aren't getting fed, aren't getting balls thrown their way, or God forbid you're throwing them hospital balls where, these guys are stretched out and they're getting crushed by a defender, that ain't going to be good. Okay. I can promise you that. You're either getting somebody hurt or somebody's going to be pissed off, like one or the other. So that's the other issue that you have here. And believe me when I tell you this, the Eagles recognize this. They see what the issue is. They know what's going on here. And I am telling you, behind closed doors, there is work being done to try to fix his footwork and to try and just cater this thing to him, which is just smart coaching. I worried when I watched the quarterback docuseries on Netflix, and they chronicled, if you didn't see it, they chronicled Patrick Mahomes and Kirk Cousins and Marcus Mariota last year, and he was with the Falcons. My first takeaway from this, and I said as much on the air, was I don't know how much Marcus Mariota loves to play football anymore. Like I got a bad vibe off of it. And I also don't like the way it ended there with him. He basically sort of went MIA and ghosted them and then elected to have knee surgery, which I think some in the Falcon organization wondered if he had to have at that time. This all coincided with him being benched for Desmond Ridder. That to me wasn't a great sign either. We're talking about a guy who was benched for Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, backed up a couple years in Oakland/Vegas, and then, lost his job to a rookie last year. This is not really a great track record. Again, but we're talking about a number 2, not a number 1. But yeah, little worrisome for me on the Mariota front. All right, let's go to a couple other things. I have zero issue with the Eagles' approach of not playing Hurts, not playing some of the other guys. Like I'm seeing some of the shots that guys are taking around the league in preseason games. Terry McLaurin in the Monday night game injures his toe, which is, by the way, I know the X-rays were negative, but I would be concerned here. Yes, and by the way, Thomas is right. YouTube family, it is officially Eagle season. The countdown is on, my friends. How about this? We have NFL action 2 weeks from Thursday. Yes, 2 weeks from Thursday, and the Eagles are 2 weeks from Sunday. Just let that set in. The only problem is the 17 days. What up, Greg? Only 7. I love that. I love his avatar there. The only prize, Pat Burrell? Yeah, Pat Burrell, I think. The only issue is the 17 days between the Eagles' final preseason game and that first real game is pure torture if you're an Eagles fan or a football fan. Like, we all know it, right? Here's what you're doing. You're grasping to the last couple of seconds of summer, right? You're doing it where you're like, oh man, I want to still enjoy the beach, or I want to hang out with my friends. I want it to be warm. I want it to still be light, et cetera, right? There's that part of your brain. Then the other part, like, fast forward this thing. Let's go. Thank you, Greg. Yes. See, I know my Pat the Bat body. Fast forward this bad boy till football. Here's the good news. College football starts this weekend. Yes, it does. So two games for you people to watch this weekend, right? Notre Dame Navy in Dublin, and my Monsignor Bonner Friars playing this weekend in Dublin, Ireland at 7 a.m. as well on Friday. So check that out. Yes, check it out. All right. I squeezed in a high school plug already in the first 13 minutes into the show. All right. Anyway, couple other things, odds and ends here. Good with the approach, no doubt. The interesting thing about this preseason, or this training camp leading up to the season, is they're legitimately jobs up for grabs. We went into it saying, all right, I'm not really sure about the safety spot. I'm not really sure about the linebacker spot. I'm not really sure about right guard. Well, let's start with right guard. Like, that is cemented. That's cemented. It's Juergens. Okay. He's done nothing to change that. He's played very, very well. High praise from Jeff Stoutland. And I think Steen is still trying to figure out the guard thing. So anyway, that's a lock. Forget that one. But what we're seeing here with linebacker, one, Myles Jack out of this thing, he retired. Good for him. I think he felt like he was probably on the back nine. What's up, Michael? Good morning to you. I think he felt like he was on the back nine when he came in here. And I think once he got in here, he was like, you know what, I'm probably done. Good for him. I respect the decision. But Zach Cunningham, with the size, with the experience, has kind of vaulted into that will spot. And he's really sort of outplayed Nicholas Morrow. That's interesting, right? And then you're going to line him up next to Nakobe Dean, a little bit smaller, less experience. I think that makes sense. The safety thing is also getting fascinating here. Like Reed Blankenship's a lock, and he's had a very good camp so far. He's a lock. But what we're starting to see here is very interesting with Sidney Brown. Started with the 3s, worked his way up to the 2s. I think eventually, maybe not week 1, we're going to see him in there starting also. The other name to keep in mind, too, in the mix here, and he's certainly going to be on the team because of how good he is special teams-wise, Christian Ellis at that linebacker spot is going to be really, really interesting. Walter, interesting point here. Weren't completely ready for the Lions game last year, especially the defense won 38-35, but they were flat. They better be ready this year playing New England, and Mac Jones has played. Yeah, the spread has gone from 5 to 4.5. I was looking at this yesterday for the New England game. It's trending towards the Patriots a little bit. Now, where is it going to be in 2+ weeks? We'll see. But I think that tells you a little something. If I were a betting man and I wouldn't bet against the Eagles, so I would stay away from the game, I'd grab New England with the points because I think it's going to be similar to Detroit last year. I think it's going to be an escape kind of game. I do. I think it's going to be one of those games where they survive it more than anything else, but I think they get out of it. Michael says might be a hot take, but I wouldn't even think twice about bringing Carson back. See, I wouldn't, man. And Michael, here's why. I don't worry that there would be any kind of insecurity on Jalen's part. Jalen is not that guy. And I don't think the fans are all of a sudden going to start saying, bring in Wentz, bring in Wentz, bring in Wentz. I don't think the guy's got it anymore, man. I don't. I think there's a lot of things that took place. I think the injuries took a bit of a toll on him, but I also think he just lost his confidence, and he does not have the clock in his head that you have to have to succeed at the NFL level anymore. And I'm not saying he won't be on somebody's roster as a backup. He's certainly better than some of the 2s and the 3s that are floating around out there if you start looking at rosters. But I don't think it's going to be here. And I also don't think it ended well here. I don't think it ended well, and I don't think the team is ready to just sort of move on from that. But I don't think it's a hot take necessarily. I think I get where you're coming from with it. Let me put it to that. What's up, Frank? Yeah, so I think there's a lot of things. Frank Vespi, my man, good morning. I think there's a couple things you got to look at here with this. So when you're talking about this team and how critical this season is, and we all know how hard it is to get back, how hard it is to win a Super Bowl. And Michael says definitely strong enough to handle it. Can't imagine any worse than Mariota. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with the way Mariota's played. He's played terrible. But you're at a point where you're trying to win the whole thing. You're not happy to be there. You're not hoping it's going to be the playoffs. You're not hoping to improve upon last year where I'm talking about 2 years ago where you got to the playoffs. You're talking about winning a Super Bowl. So every I's got to be dotted. Every T's got to be crossed as much as you can in this day and age with a hard salary cap. That's it, man. And you got to try to get this thing right. That's for sure. But where I was with the positions that are open, I think the Eagles are doing the right thing, not locking in certain spots. I think the linebacker thing is fluid. I think the safety thing is going to be fluid with Nakobe Dean being the piece in the middle, with Reed Blankenship being one of those safety spots. I think the rest of it is kind of fluid. And we'll see how that thing plays out. The other thing, what I've liked so far, I really like what I've seen from Jalen Carter. I don't know if anybody got a chance to see some of the things that Darius Slay had to say about him. He calls him Baby Rhino. And he went over the top praising Jalen Carter. I think Jalen Carter is going to be an absolute monster for this team. I'm telling you, he will be when the season comes to a close, we're going to say this is the Eagles' best defensive tackle. Better than Fletcher Cox. I'm not saying career and accomplishment better than Fletcher Cox. Obviously, you do it for 10 years in the league like Fletcher Cox has. I have a lot of respect for that. I'm talking about right now, currently. He will have that kind of year. I think he'll be discussed in the defensive player, rookie of the year conversation. I believe that. So I think that's good. I love Nolan Smith. I hope this shoulder thing is not a problem. He was shut down from the game the other night. He has not practiced in a couple of days. He may be out there today. We'll see. But it's the same shoulder that he injured in college. And he's a pretty funny dude. If you haven't had a chance to watch some of his interviews, check him out. He's funny, man. He's like a character. And I think he's a leader too. He's a very likable dude. But at one point he says, yeah, sometimes the shoulder works, sometimes it don't. I'm like, 22 years old and sometimes the shoulder don't work. That's a little worrisome. That's a little worrisome for me. Anyway, so I think Carter's going to be a beast, absolute beast. I love it, Michael. I hope you're right. You all right, check it out. All right. Now you just referenced who? Reggie, right? You see Reggie behind me? I got Bednarik behind me. I got Reggie behind me, and I got Doc and Bird choking each other out. All right. That's how we roll in the Rob Ellis studio for A2D radio. That's how we roll on the Rob Ellis show. But yeah, so I think that when you look at the situation with the younger players, I think they will have an impact on this team. And I bring up Carter, I bring up Nolan Smith for the reason that I think this team will still be one of, and I'm going to say top 3 teams in the league in terms of getting to the quarterback. I do. I think you take a little bit of a hit with Hargrave, no doubt. And I don't think they're going to be 70 sacks good, but I think they're going to be really, really good, which is going to help sort of the learning curve for the linebacker situation, for the safety situation, maybe take some of the heat off of Slay and Bradbury and Avonte Maddox back there. So I think that defensive line is going to be a key. I've told you before, I think early it's going to take the defense a little while to acclimate because there's a lot of moving parts and new faces, including Sean Desai. So that's going to have to be a little bit of a patience situation. As far as the offense goes, it's got to hit the ground running. Like you're talking in offense, it's got to be putting up 30 some odd points per game. They were 28 last year. It's got to be in that range for them right out of the chute because the changes aren't that great. Yes, running back's going to look a little bit different. And we mentioned right guard, but other than that, you got Jalen. And by the way, what an SI piece. If you haven't seen it, Jalen on the cover of Sports Illustrated, I think it's Greg Bishop who wrote the story. It's awesome. It's absolutely great. And it gives you a lot of insight into him going back to his childhood, how he's an incredibly grounded, sort of habitual, goal-oriented, prepared, thought-out guy. I mean, in addition to all the talent that he has, he's got this. That's really what separates the great quarterbacks and great athletes from the others. Like there's a lot of people who have talent, but when you have that drive and that sort of organization and everything else that Jalen Hurts has, that's the difference. This is the stuff that everybody whiffed on. They looked at it and they said, well, he's not that great of a thrower right now. And he got benched for Tua. And, there was a lot more to this thing. I mean, ask yourself right now. And even if Tua didn't have any injury history, would you want Tua or would you want Jalen Hurts? Not even close. Not even close. Anyway, check it out if you haven't seen it. But the offense should be really good out of the chute. And I think there's a lot of different things that you can look at here. That's for sure. But for me, like Hurts has had a great camp, and we don't even really talk about it. We just sort of move on from it and just ignore it here. But same thing for Brown and Devontae Smith. I mean, you have arguably the best duo in football there. And then if Goddard can stay healthy, I mean, I don't think he's quite Kelsey and Kittle, but tell me he's not in that next tier, like maybe after those guys and Mark Andrews. That's where he's at. That's how good he is. You're the best offensive line in football. And I think Juergens is going to be just fine. First of all, he's surrounded by studs, and he's got Jeff Stoutland coaching him. I mean, need I say more? So I think they're going to be fine there. And I think they're going to score a lot of points. I do. I think this is going to be a fun team to watch offensively. But a lot of excitement, rightfully so. You got to get through this one more game, this one more preseason game. And look, we'll all be locked in. We will. I'll be taking my notes, as I always do, on my pad of paper. This is what I do. I'm a note taker. But we do all those kind of things. So definitely a lot of excitement for the Eagles. I do think the backup QB thing is real. And I do agree with our question of the day that Marcus Mariota should be the backup when you consider, what the situation is for this thing. But I think if it's long-term and he's not playing well, I do think we could see a situation potentially for somebody like Matt Ryan. He would be my choice. I wouldn't go the Wentz route. I wouldn't go Nick Foles. I don't know about you guys, but tell me what you think here. Is this weird? There's a little part of me that doesn't want to see Foles come here and fail. You know what I mean? I kind of like that he went out on the high note. And I'd rather not see a sort of broken down end of the career Nick Foles struggling, ugly, looking like he's toast situation. I'd rather not see that, honestly. And I feel like that's kind of where he is at this point. And maybe that's just me. Maybe you throw caution to the wind. You say, who cares? His legacy cemented anyway. He won a Super Bowl, whatever. But maybe that's just me. I would rather not see that. Let me throw one more thing Eagles-wise before we move on to the Phils. I know, Jonathan Taylor's been given permission to seek a trade. I don't see it for the Eagles. Not saying I wouldn't want Jonathan Taylor. I want Jonathan Taylor in a second. But they don't value the running back position enough to give up draft capital that it's going to take. Like, I think the Colts want either a 1 or like multiple 2s. And I don't think I know the Eagles aren't going to give up a first rounder, and I don't see them giving up multiple 2s for a running back. I just don't. And the thing is, you're going to give up that kind of capital. You're going to want to sign him long-term. He's in the last year of his deal. They're also not going to give out a contract that Jonathan Taylor's looking for. So I don't see that. I don't see that happening. We'll see. I think he may end up getting moved. That's for sure. I think the Dolphins could be certainly a landing spot for him. There's a couple other places. If Cook hadn't ended up with the Jets, I think that may have been a possibility. But what a mess. I mean, you're setting up Anthony Richardson for failure because he's not going to have a quality running back. The Carolina Panthers offensive line is a sieve. You're setting up Bryce Young, who's already tiny, to just get beat up. I mean, these are tough recipes for younger quarterbacks around the league. All right. Nonetheless, let's go Phillies here. Nice win. Nice win Monday night against the Giants. And obviously a critical series, probably the most important series they played all year. So to jump out and get the first one was really important. It was, Aaron Nola's baffling, isn't he? I mean, 2 more home runs last night. I think he's up to 29 now allowed for the season. But the fact that they were both solos and then he settles in and he gives you 7 innings. I mean, it's one of those games where you're like, all right, I don't know how to feel about Aaron Nola going into a postseason run. I really don't. If I know Rob Thompson, his starting rotation in the playoffs is going to be Wheeler, Nola, and then I think the third spot is TBA. I think it depends on how these guys pitch. If Ranger comes back healthy from the IL and pitches well, it could be Ranger. But Ranger has versatility where you can throw him in the bullpen. If Michael Lorenzen, if the last start that was bad was just a hiccup, and he keeps pitching the way he pitched for the Tigers and the way he pitched the first 2 games for the Phillies, it could certainly be Michael Lorenzen in the 3-hole. But Michael Lorenzen also has bullpen experience. Taijuan Walker has a lot of wins, but there are a lot of question marks with Taijuan Walker too. They've given him crazy run support. I don't know that they would trust him as a starter in a playoff setting. We'll see. And then, the ironic thing is Christopher Sanchez has probably been about as consistent as any starter for them since he jumped into the rotation again. But he's not going to be in there. So I think the third spot TBA, and then whoever 3 is, 4 will play off of them. And then if you really tighten it up to just 3, well, we know how that works. So he had one of those games last night where he only gives up a couple solo shots and the bats really delivered. Phillies have been weirdly just like either all or nothing offensively, and you saw it 2 of the games against the Nats, right? The game Saturday, they're getting shut out going into the 7th, and then they drop a 12 spot. And then the Sunday night game at Williamsport, they're getting shut out, and then they put up, 3 late ones in the 9th. And then last night, they go off and it's 4 home runs and it's, blah, blah, blah. And then they end up winning easily. You're just looking for a little bit more consistency. And they're very driven by the long ball. We know that, right? Schwarber went yard, Harper had an inside the park homer, Bohm went yard. You're going to get inconsistency when that's the case. All right. Walter would go, this is what he thinks Thompson will do. Wheeler, Walker, Nola, and Lorenzen. I don't think Walker's too, Walter. I don't. I think he's so loyal to his guys that he goes Nola 2. I really do. I would consider Nola 3 or 4, honestly. But I know how Thompson operates. If Lorenzen deals the rest of the way, Lorenzen's my number 2. If Ranger gets rolling here, Ranger could be my 2. Like, I would very easily move Nola to a 3 spot. But, we'll see. But anyway, it's a good win against the Giants because it gives you a little bit of distance, right? That's all you're looking to do. And it is a big deal to get the top spot, to have home field advantage for the wild card. I would much rather, if it's going to be the Giants, and it's still close, it could go a lot of different ways. But if it's going to be the Giants, would you much rather they have to come here and having to go out to the West Coast? I mean, the Phillies did a great job last year taking care of business in St. Louis. But the Phillies traditionally have had a really hard time in San Francisco. I'd like it to come here. Now, the way this thing is, it's sort of just piled up behind the Phillies. So the Phillies right now are 2.5 up on the Cubs, 3 up on the Giants. And then it's super tight after that. Diamondbacks are a half a game out of the 3rd spot behind the Giants. Reds are a game. Marlins are a game and a half. So it's really, really tight. But I got to tell you, of all of those teams, Cubs, Giants, D-backs, Reds, Marlins, I'm not even going to count the Padres. They're not even worthy of counting. Of all of those teams, I feel good about the Phillies' chances against any of them. But we do know that they can go hot and cold from time to time. The good thing is it looks like Harper's getting the power stroke back. That's big. That is certainly big for this team. Schwarber, as much as he frustrates people, and I get it, believe me, but the jolt that he gives this team, whether it's a leadoff home run to start the game or whether it's a home run later, like the tape measure shot that he hit last night, it just, you can just see the way that they sort of lift collectively as a team when he does those kind of things. So he's going to be in the lineup one way or the other. The good thing is in the playoffs, Harper's going to play first every day, I believe, which means Schwarber won't be in the field, which is huge. Because if you can throw an outfield out there with some form of Marsh, Rojas, and Pache, maybe potentially, or even for late game, defensive replacement purposes. And then at Castellanos, who's actually, to his credit, played a very good right field. He has. I never thought he'd be saying that, but he has. That's a good fielding outfield. It really is. Turner, I know he had the error the other day, but he's played a much better shortstop defensively. We know what Bryson Stott's been all year. We know what Real Muto is. One guy I want to single out here from a defensive standpoint with his improvement. What Alec Boehm has done with the glove this year, he's had a really good offensive year too, in terms of driving in runs, batting average. He uses all fields. There's a lot to like with him. But what we've seen from Boehm, whether it's at first or third, which is not easy, has been remarkable. And it's a testament to work. So is Castellanos in right field. It's a testament to hard work that both of those guys have done and put in to get to where they are. So I give them both a lot of credit for that. But here's where we are with this team. There's the wild card component, and then there's the component of getting to and winning a World Series, right? And I think we all sort of sit back and we look at the Braves and what they do, and you're just like, oh my God, man, like this is nothing short of amazing. I mean, they're at 80 wins already. I mean, think about that. 80 wins. They're playing at a 645 winning clip. They're 80-44. And that's having lost their last 2. But the thing is, we know the history here. Braves won 100 games last year, and the Phillies knocked them out. The baseball playoffs are weird. They're very strange, and weird things happen. A lot of it comes down to pitching, and don't lose sight of this too. The home field advantage for the Phillies is greater than anywhere else in baseball. It flat out is. And that is not me waving pom-poms and being a homer. It's a fact. It's such an advantage that guys like Trey Turner wanted to come here last year after watching the playoffs and seeing what was going on. It's a big deal. So my point, the reason I say that is, A, in a wild card setting, you want the home field advantage. B, any series that you get into that's going to be here is going to be on fire. Like, I think the crowd played a part in the Phillies knocking off the Braves last year. I do. Like, I think it got to Strider a little bit. I know he was only a rookie last year, and we know what a stud he is. But I think if you get the Braves, despite how great they are, and that lineup is insanity, okay? You get quality pitching, it offsets everything. And I think this thing's doable for this Phillies team. I really do. You're getting Alvarado back now. If you think about the back end of the bullpen, and this is assuming health for everybody, you have Kimbrel, you have Alvarado, you have Sir Anthony, and you have Gregory Soto. And I don't fully trust Soto yet. Let me just be clear there. But if all these guys are healthy, that is some nasty stuff that they are rolling out there in the back end. Like some really, really good stuff right there from those guys. So I think the Phillies' chances are good. I've told you all along, I thought they'd be the number one wild card team. They're not catching the Braves, but they're going to be the number one wild card team. I think the experience from last year really helps. I mean, you think about it, they're trailing in game one against St. Louis, right? They're down and they're able to fight their way back. Then the run starts. And having gone through that and beating the Braves after that, and then beating San Diego after that. And let's face it, taking an Astros team that's like a mini dynasty, pretty close, taking them to game 6 that you were right there in, that helps them against some of these other teams that haven't necessarily been in the playoffs. So I think that part of it is a big deal. It shouldn't be lost on anybody. Let me give a little love to both the Phillies, Nats too, and Major League Baseball. I thought what went on over the weekend, Sunday in particular, Sunday day and night, at Williamsport, where the Little League World Series is, was so damn cool. So cool. And I think if you want to try to grow the game and get some of the youth back in the game, days like that go a real long way. A real long way. Walter says the thing about being a 6 seed is that you play the weakest division winner, like the Phillies last year. This year, a Seattle team could play the Twins. Yeah, you're right, Walter. You're absolutely right. But just back to what I was saying with the Williamsport, to watch the Phillies players staying there, cheering on the media team that ended up losing to Rhode Island, unfortunately, but to watch them cheering that team on was so cool. Like, it told you, like, these guys are all in with Philadelphia. They're not just, renting. Like, they're taking ownership. And they're proud to represent, the crest on the front. But I thought that was really, really cool. And Harper actually stayed longer than anybody else, stayed till the end, even though media, it got kind of ugly for them in the final inning. But Harper, like, staying there, taking it all in, I just thought was so freaking cool. What's up, Coach Marcus? My guy, Pro Fan Talk, my guy Marcus, who was at the Eagles game on Thursday night, by the way. Good to hear from you, Marcus. But I thought that was so cool, those guys. And just the whole fun that they had riding the buses with those guys, giving them bats. Props to Nick Castellanos, who gave all the media kids bats, the whole nine. I just thought it was really, really awesome. So credit to those guys for the way that they handled it. Credit to baseball for trying something new and growing the game. I know they've been going to Williamsport for a few years now, but it's not often that a sport does something that's creative and hits the mark. The one, and we're going back now almost 20 years, but 15 years, whatever it is, baseball doing, or hockey doing the Winter Classic was something that was new. And I thought it was something that was really cool. But baseball in general, that has been so sort of stringent and restricted for so many years, made sweeping changes to the way that the game is played now with the pitch clock, which was the right way to go. And it has proven to be the right way to go. And doing things like that are important. It's a way to keep people with a short attention span. And let's face it, we all have a shorter attention span than we had, 5-10 years ago, and people had 10 years ago. So I think that was a smart move and a good move by baseball. Props to them. But I also think that it's a way, what this weekend did and will do is a way to grow the game with the younger kids. So props to baseball. But look, a lot good here with the Phillies, in my opinion. I know they're frustrating sometimes. I know they shouldn't have lost 2 or 3 to the Nats, but for the most part, they've been stacking series wins for the most part. And I think that's something, if you look at what the schedule is coming up, and you need to take advantage of these long homestands that they've had. And they've had a couple of them, and they have way more home than road games in the second half. But if you can get either Tuesday or Wednesday against the Giants and win that series, big, obviously. A St. Louis team that's had a really disappointing season comes in here over the weekend. And then it's the Angels who are kind of falling apart, but we know the challenge is when you have an Ohtani and that kind of thing, but they're coming in here before you get on the road. They're not back on the road until September 1st. They go to Milwaukee September 1st, but prior to that, these are all home games. So you got to take advantage of it. You're going to get the Braves again, September 11th. That'll be pretty cool, right? You're coming out of an Eagles game that Sunday, the season opener into a Brave series here for 4. It's actually a 4-game series, which is pretty cool. So that'll be fun for sure. And then you get Atlanta twice down there. And again, I'm not telling you like these are critical games in terms of standings because Atlanta's winning the standing in the division. But if you want to get a little measuring stick and plant a little seed in their minds, if you meet them a little bit later in the season or in the postseason, then I think it is important. That's for sure. All right. So I did want to, before we get out of here, jump over to the Sixers. And as I told you last week, this thing with Harden is not getting resolved until either right before the season starts or in season. If I'm leaning one way or the other, I'm leaning more toward he gets traded before the season starts. That's where it's been my stance all along, and it'll continue to be my stance. But the thing is, I think when you're a fan of a team, or you're a fan in general, let me put it that way, you want a good guy, you want a bad guy, right? You want the good guy, you want the villain. You want somebody to root for and feel good about throwing your support behind. Does anybody feel good here? Like with the Sixers situation? Like nobody wants to back Harden. But the Sixers have screwed this thing up so royally the last few years. And with the handling of all of this, that you're like, I don't know what side I'm on here at this point. It's horrible. So the latest is the NBA is investigating Harden's, calling Daryl Morey a liar. And what we're hearing is he's calling him a liar based on Morey promising he would trade him. All right, so let's dig into that for a minute. And not that he promised them a monster contract. That's where the Sixers will get themselves in trouble. Try to circumnavigate the cap. So let's dig into that for a second. Number one, I don't believe for a second that Morey said, hey, I'm guaranteeing I'm going to get you to the Clippers. I don't think that happened. I think when Harden opted in, Morey probably said, look, I'll do what I can, to get you somewhere that'll be a good destination for you. But I gotta get a good return here because I got to look out for the 76ers' best interest. That's how I think the conversation went. But I think Harden probably only heard, hey, you're going to trade me. And when the report came out, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, that trade talks have been shut down. I don't know what the purpose of that was, by the way. That was leaked, I'm sure, from the Sixers end of things. But I don't know what the purpose of that was. Like, how are you not always listening to possible trade, talks? But anyway, Harden hears that sets him off. He goes, Daryl Morey's a liar. I'll never play for an organization he's a part of. That's where it all starts. Harden's in the wrong here on a couple of levels. One, again, if my assumption here is right, that he wasn't promised exactly where he would go and in some speedy fashion, and he's just assuming that's on him. Number two, when you opted in, you were at the mercy of the Sixers. Plain and simple. You opted in, you can't be extended. You don't have a no trade clause. So the Sixers, and you're their property, could do whatever they wanted with you. So it's on you if you're ticked off that you're not getting traded in a timely fashion. It's on you. We all know why he opted in. He opted in because he didn't have any other options. He ruined the NBA. Jimmy. You know what, Jimmy? The player empowerment is a big issue in the league. And I don't want the owners to have the hammer on these guys completely, but I'm telling you, it's gotten so out of control with the player empowerment. It is just, it's the second they don't like something, it's trade me. I want out, and I'm going to fake being hurt. I'm going to be miserable. I'm going to ruin things for your organization, et cetera. That's what it turns into. And I'll get to that in a second. But just back to the Harden thing. What's up, Charles? How you doing, my man? When you're at the mercy of the team, you got to live with whatever they're going to do. And because you and your agent knew you weren't going to get 35, and I agree with Coach Marcus, he made his bed. I agree too, Walter. You can't trade him for stiffs and picks. But and that's what Morey's holding firm on. When you realized you weren't going to get 35 million out there from anybody else and you opted in, you wanted to get paid and also get traded. You wanted to have it all. And you're going to get one part of it. You're going to get your 35 million if you report. He will report. He's not going to miss out on 35 million. But the other part isn't a guarantee. And what you're seeing is that was the first salvo. Like this is going to be a long, drawn out process by Harden and his camp to do everything they can to take down the Sixers. I guarantee. Like, we've lived through this before. If you're old enough to remember what T.O. did in 2005, when he set about with a flame torch to try to take the Eagles down, he went after the organization, then he went after McNabb, and then everything just kind of came apart. You're going to get something. I don't know if it's going to be, the exact blueprint that T.O. laid out, but you're going to get something like that from Harden. Like, he's gone directly at Daryl Morey. I'll never play for an organization he's a part of. What's the next step? You're going to start ripping some players? Like, I don't know that he goes after Embiid, but are you going to start going after players? Are there going to be whispers about that? But it's going to be ugly. And everywhere he's gone, it's ended ugly. Think about it. Other than maybe Oklahoma City. Houston, it ended ugly. Brooklyn, it ended ugly. And it's ending ugly with the Sixers. This is what happens. Like, you lay down with a dog with fleas, you're going to get fleas. What up, Rob? Good morning, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. Tell a friend. And I get where, must be wise. Just trade him better for the team. There is definitely something to be said for that. Like, addition by subtraction, get him out of here. Even if it's lesser players, let's just concentrate on Embiid and Maxey and what they have. And that, again, I don't think that part of it is crazy. But the problem you have is you have a very stubborn general manager in Daryl Morey. And I think stubborn for two reasons. One, for the right reason, he wants to get a good return for the Sixers. That's exactly what his job is. So that part of it, no issue. There's also a little bit of an ego there with Daryl Morey. So I think that's a piece of this thing. Like, there's a little bit of sort of that one-on-one, these two kind of going at one another, right? So I think that part of it plays into it. And ego shouldn't play into it, but we know in the world that we live in, yeah, it does. It does. So where are the Sixers ultimately? Don't get lost in all the weeds here. The weeds are the Harden thing and all the drama that always goes on with the Sixers. The problem is when you get the machete out or the weed whacker and you cut through all this crap, right? And then you're sort of looking around like, all right, well, what do we really have here? What you really have here is a team that isn't any better than it was last year. There's the ultimate problem. What you see here is a team that, in my opinion, is not good enough to get out of the second round, is not good enough to get out of the Eastern Conference, is not good enough to win an NBA championship. We're at a point where we're way past rebuilding or climbing or any of that kind of stuff with the 76ers. Way past it. Joel Embiid, 30 years old, whatever he is, and doesn't appear to be a guy health-wise that's going to be super productive, mid to late 30s. Your window is right now. Right now. And because they painted themselves into a corner with Harden, because they don't have cap space, because they don't have picks, they don't have any of these things, they were unable to be any kind of players in the offseason, which leaves you where? Where does it leave you? It leaves you basically in the same spot. I mean, ask yourself the question, are they better than Milwaukee? Are they better than Miami? Are they better than Boston? I don't know. Are they in the same conversation now with the Knicks and the Cavaliers? In my opinion, yes, they are. So ultimately, we're back where we started or worse. So that's the thing with the Sixers through all of this, through the whole process, right? All the things that we went through, watching Tony Roten and Henry Sims out there. They're still in the same, exactly right. Trust the process part 2. Nobody's trusting the process part 2. You get one process per lifetime. But nonetheless, the frustrating thing for me is they're not going anywhere. They really, bottom line, that we're in spin your wheels mode with this whole thing. All right, I want to swing it back to let's get it back to the Eagles, which was by the way, if you are someone who listens to sports talk radio and you hear that phrase used, mine. Let's get it back to the Eagles. I am incredibly excited about this year for a lot of reasons. I think you have a really good head coach. I think you have a really good general manager. I think you have a really good owner. I think you have a really good culture. I think you have a quarterback who's as driven as he is talented. And you have, I think, in the trenches, the best offensive line and a really strong defensive line. When you have those components that this team has, that's how you win a Super Bowl. That's how you're a successful NFL team. The teams that don't have the quarterback, that don't have the offensive line. I mean, you again, I referenced it earlier. You watch what's going to happen. And I really like Frank Reich and I really like Bryce Young. But, man, if that offensive line keeps playing that way, that kid will not be upright. When you don't have those components, you're in big trouble. You need to be able to protect your quarterback. You need to be able to get to the other team's quarterback. The Eagles have those things. Now, the thing you can't count on, you can't account for is injuries. That applies to everybody. Okay. But if this team stays healthy, I believe they will buck the trend. I believe they will be a team that is in contention to win the Super Bowl. And if you think about it, last year, as great as Mahomes and the Chiefs and Andy Reid is, and like nobody's denying that, it was the Eagles' game. They made one critical error, with the Hurts thing, but it wasn't just that. There were corrections that needed to be made on the defensive side in the second half, things that I think will be correctable this year. So it isn't like, as good as the AFC is, you only have to play one AFC team when it comes to the postseason. Yes, you're going to get those teams in the regular season, no doubt. You got to worry about getting out of your conference. And if you look at the conference right now, okay, just sort of walk through the NFC. Cowboys are a challenge, no doubt. The division's good, all in all. But really, other than San Fran and Dallas, is there anybody that scares you? Does anybody in the North scare you? Does anybody in the South scare you? Seattle? And I know the Eagles don't usually play well there, but they don't scare me in a playoff setting. So then you whittle it down to just those two teams, the 49ers and the Cowboys. And, we've seen in years past that the Cowboys don't have the moxie, the stones for what it takes in the playoffs. And we know that San Francisco, as talented as they are, and they're talented, make no mistake, but as talented as they are, if you have a matchup of Purdy versus Hurts, who are you taking there? If you have a matchup of Sirianni versus Kyle Shanahan in a big game, who are you taking there? I'll take the Eagles on both of those fronts, right? And that's what it's going to come down to here. And I also think when it comes to the Niners, that the Eagles are still very much in their head. I mean, I don't know about you, but I still hear from 49ers fans who are still crying about the NFC Championship game, as if they were wronged in some way. Your quarterbacks got knocked out because you couldn't protect your quarterbacks. It's tackle football. It's a physical game. I mean, give me a break. Walter, I like Green Bay. I actually like Green Bay. I think Jordan Love's going to be good. I have this debate with my guy Derek Gunn all the time, and he's a Packer fan. He grew up in Wisconsin, right? I think Green Bay wins that division. I know most people have the Lions or potentially the Vikings. There's a little hot take for you. I'll give you 2 division winners that might surprise you. I'm going to take Green Bay in the North, and I'm going to take the Atlanta Falcons in the South. Most people have the Saints there. I'm going to take the Falcons in the South. I think Desmond Ridder's going to be good, and I really like what Atlanta did in the offseason. So anyway, but again, if the Eagles are playing either one of those 2 teams in that situation, I like the Eagles. But regardless, I think the Eagles are set up to be that team this year. And if they're able to, again, get through that daunting trend of teams either getting to the Super Bowl or winning the Super Bowl and repeating, and we know it hasn't happened. New England did it when they lost to the Eagles and they came back and won it the next year, but it rarely ever happens. The crazy thing is nobody ever wins the division back-to-back either. But I like the Eagles in this situation. I think the NFC East is going to be a big challenge because I think the Giants are pretty good and they're well coached. I don't necessarily love their wideouts, but I think with Waller, the addition, they're going to be pretty solid. Dallas, we know, is a talented team, but it comes down to Mike McCarthy and Prescott in a big spot. I don't think Washington's going to be bad. I don't. A lot of it's going to come down to Sam Howell, obviously, but there's talent on that team for sure. So my point is, I don't think Washington is a huge threat to the Eagles, but you'd like to have a couple of cupcakes in the division, and there aren't any. I mean, this is going to be a challenge to get out of this thing. That's for sure for the Eagles, and not just a challenge to get out of it. It's a tough schedule. It's harder than last year. It just is. Things change. Teams have injuries. Teams underachieve. We all know that. But you look at this thing on paper, and it's definitely a harder schedule than what they had last year. All right. So next week, I'll be back with you again. We'll be hanging out. We'll hit everything that we usually hit. We'll be that much closer to the Eagles season starting. We'll have a little better handle on where the Phillies are with some of the competition that they're going to be playing upcoming. But, we're coming in here. I think we're coming in hot for October. We're coming in hot for October because we're going to have a Phillies team that's going to be in the playoffs. We're going to have an Eagles team similar to last year that I think is going to be, starting the season off in a strong way. And there isn't a much more fun time of year when you have the Eagles on a weekend. I know there could be the Thursday night game here and there, and the Phillies basically going every single night. It is an incredibly fun time of year. And it's why we love sports, right? I mean, ultimately you want to have something to look forward to, and you want to have something that can provide an escape, from the day-to-day for you. And I think, in Philadelphia sports right now, as frustrating as the Sixers are and the Flyers are trying to get back on the map and all that kind of thing, fortunately, the baseball team and the football team playing at a very high level. And for those of you who love college football like I do, we are literally right around the corner for that starting as well. All right. Thanks to everybody in the chat section. You guys have been awesome today. Keep it rolling, man. I love the interaction. I really do. And you take the time to jump on the show with me and throw a comment out there, man. I will interact and I will react. And I appreciate you guys very much. A lot of fun today. I want to thank my man, Ralph, doing an awesome job producing the show. Of course, I want to thank my guy, Tom, who does an awesome job running the show here at A2D Radio. So I'll be back with you guys next week. Looking forward to it as always. And again, like I tell you, spread the word, tell a friend. You want to share it on social media. Let's share it. We do it each and every week. The Rob Ellis Show right here on A2D Radio. Appreciate you guys.